This is a time for greatness.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining me today. My name is Joe Manuele. I'm the Group Executive for Customer Experience and Collaboration at Dimension Data, based in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley. And I take full credit for the weather. The sun the last couple of days was completely because of me. Here today to talk to you a little bit about a report that we've done most recently. But before I jump into that, a little bit about Dimension Data, some things that you may or may not know. Are all of you familiar with Dimension Data? Have you run into us in the past? Show of hands. Yeah, great. So Dimension Data is a 31,000 person company now, just under $8 billion in turnover last year. We now have legal entities in 62 countries worldwide. We were purchased by NTT in 2010. Which is a $105 billion organization. So the company has evolved, based still in South Africa, in Joburg, but we've grown significantly. Within that organization, the business unit that I run is the second largest business unit, just under $2 billion in sales, and we've built an impressive practice. So over 19 million Cisco IP telephony phones that have been sold through our organization in the last 10 years or so. One of the largest Microsoft Skype for Business practices as well. Partner of the Year with Genesys, one of the largest partners. We won several awards with Cisco on the contact center side as well. So the business has really, really grown. We may not be known necessarily for collaboration and for contact center, but it is the second largest business unit within our organization, and one I'm very proud to be a part of. So a little bit about the study that we commissioned last year. We worked with our analyst partner Ovum on this report. And those of you who know a little bit about Dimension Data and our benchmarking report, we've issued the Merchants Contact Center Benchmarking Report for 19 years now. Actually, we just released the last version about 2 weeks ago. It served as the inspiration for us to create this report for the UC world. So if you take a look at this particular report, we interviewed 900 enterprise clients. The interesting thing we did is within the same enterprise clients that we interviewed, we asked the same questions to IT professionals as well as lines of businesses within the same organization, just to see if there's a disconnect between what's actually being installed and what's being used. We went across 15 countries and across 10 different industry verticals, and one important factor, it's 1,000 employees and above. So some of the study revealed some interesting statistics and trends that we're going to continue to build upon. This is the first year we've done it. But again, we definitely see a different trend within what we would call the SMB space, 500 users and below, and 1,000 users and above. And then we can interpret where the 500 to 1,000 fit. So we came up with, I guess the summary of it is the good, the bad, and the unbelievable to avoid the lawsuit instead of the ugly. So first of all, the good. So what are the obvious things that we saw? So 87% say that collaboration improved teamwork, things that we would normally expect. Things that really jumped out, 89% said that the lines of businesses within their organizations actually played a critical role in their strategy, which was a huge shift. So we've heard this term being coined by Gartner, the whole idea of bimodal IT. Or I've also heard the term rogue IT. The IT folks, lines of businesses making their own IT decisions. Very prevalent within the UC world, within the report, and I'll talk a little bit about that. The other thing that was really interesting is when you're rolling out collaboration tools, the number 2 reason was to improve sales. So one of the things we definitely noticed throughout the report was the need to communicate outside the enterprise. So it's a successful collaboration deployment is when I have the ability to reach out and speak to different lines of businesses as one thing, but also to reach out to my clients and to my partners, my ecosystem partners, my suppliers. So that one was actually one of the things that we found surprising. The bad, there's a lot of things to pick from here. 1/4 of lines of businesses say they use consumer-based applications without the knowledge of IT. Now, this was exceptionally surprising to us because a lot of the respondents were working in heavily regulated industries. So if you're in healthcare, if you, in the US, you have very strict HIPAA compliance rules. If you're in financial services, data sovereignty rules. Now you've got, within the same organizations, lines of businesses making their own decisions, possibly sharing information in public cloud infrastructures without the proper security or without the proper compliance regulations in place. So this one was really one that really, I guess this is the CIO's nightmare come true. And then the second one that was, we consider bad was a third of the respondents said that they provide web collaboration tools, but they're not being used. So another big trend that we've noticed is there's a big disconnect between the ability to install and to enable a technology versus how it's enabled and how it's deployed. So this is one of the trends we'll talk a little bit about. The unbelievable, I guess the one that really jumped out for me was that 38% basically admitted that they do not have a UC&C strategy. So these are large enterprise clients, 1,000 users and above. So I have actually started asking this question when I meet with clients. Say, well, what's your UC strategy? Do you have one? And it's quite exceptional to see how few of them don't have one. And what they've really done is upgraded their existing systems. So I've added video, or I've added web conferencing as an island. I've upgraded my voice infrastructure. I've added digital channels to my customer experience. But it's actually a reactionary thing, typically because a specific department decided they're going to use a video endpoint, and then it grows within the organization. It wasn't really thought through. So that one really, really jumped out at us, amongst others, actually. So if we turn this into a positive, you say, okay, you've had a successful collaboration deployment. Why were you successful? The number one reason was that the organizations say they've created a culture where they've been able to accept the way people work, given that the technology enables you to work differently. So if you're, the analogy that I used to work for a German company when I was up in Toronto. Mr. Zagebield, lovely man, very successful man. One morning he decided he was going to stand in front of the office at 8 a.m. with his assistant, and he was basically taking roll call as you're walking in. And then he created a town hall, and he basically said to everyone, the work day starts at 8:30 in the morning. You shall be at the office every day at 8:30, and I expect you to leave at 5. If that's your corporate culture, it doesn't really matter that you're enabling WebEx tools on mobile devices. You have to accept the fact that people work differently. Some of the millennials in the room might say, what are you talking about? The office, 8:30 to 5. People used to work like that. So you have to change the culture to adapt to the technology. That means you might be doing a WebEx call at 7 a.m. like I did this morning from my hotel room, connecting with folks from Japan, from France, and from Australia, right? And you have to accept the fact that these tools enable a different way to work. And if you accept that and enable the way that people work differently, it's one of the reasons for success. The one at the end, the executive sponsorship, the top down. If you get an invitation to join a video call or a conference call from your boss or your boss's boss, odds are pretty good you're going to learn how to use that tool, right? So it's a way to force the top-down approach. We thought we would have higher respondents, but the number one is really the culture. You can also argue that the two are related, right? If the executive, if the C-suite uses a certain tool, and this is how we communicate now, I don't need you to fly in to Joburg for a meeting every 3 months. We can actually do it using the technology instead. Then that would obviously changes the culture and the way people work. So along the same lines, when you start asking CIOs, how do you define success? Lots of different criteria. You roll out a project, whether it's audio conferencing, web conferencing, whatever the tool happens to be. The number one success criteria, I call this the mission accomplished sign. I think of George Bush on the aircraft carrier. I've successfully implemented the technology. So let me explain what that looks like. Over a period of months or weeks, you create the firewalls, you install the workloads, you create the usernames, the passwords, you send an email blast out on a Friday afternoon and say, congratulations, this new tool is available, click on this link, and you're online. So to many IT folks, 1 in 4 basically said, my job's done. The tool's available. And what we've realized is when you do that, the adoption is very, very disappointing. So what we're suggesting to people, and I'll talk a little bit about the recommendations at the end of the report, is that success is really about how many people are using the tool and how you measure the ROI against that tool. So there's a real disconnect between making a tool available and the adoption of that tool. So we're basically challenging our folks in the IT organizations to say, making the tool available, it just doesn't cut it. It's not enough. Oh, there we go. So we've talked a little bit about the lines of businesses and the role that the LOBs are playing. I touched on it a little bit. The first point up there is interesting. 56% of the dollars spent, of the funding, of the purchasing, if you will, is either done or funded by the lines of businesses. I had a chance to attend a Cisco Partner Summit in San Diego. Chuck Robbins, CEO of Cisco, said something that was really interesting. He said that the size of an executive briefing visit has gone from an average of 3 or 4 clients to 11 people. 70% of the people who show up at a technology EBC are not with IT or not with procurement. Typically, it was the purchasing guy and the IT guy, right, that would show up. Now it's the head of marketing, it's the head of sales, it's head of manufacturing. They want to take a specific interest in the productivity tools that help them achieve their goals. So this is one of the changes that we're starting to see. The second bullet point, which is interesting, is that 57% say they support their own collaboration tools. A quarter of them said, I buy my own tools and IT doesn't even know about it. That's extremely dangerous. Now, when we say they supported themselves, I'm not even talking about consumer apps. I'm not talking about WhatsApp. I'm not talking about FaceTime, the occasional point-to-point application. I'm saying folks go out and buy their own licenses of WebEx or their own licenses of BlueJeans or whatever the tool is, right? Now, the interesting thing that when we start poking at this and you really start digging into it, within our practice, we have a division called a CLM group, Carrier Lifecycle Management, where we'll go in and perform audits. And we find an incredible amount of duplication of licenses. So IT may have purchased an ELA, an enterprise-wide license for a specific piece of software, and a line of business will have bought the exact same software for their department without them communicating. And we're saying here 25% are making these decisions without IT even being aware of it. So above and beyond the obvious compliance issues, above and beyond the obvious data sovereignty rules that might be breached depending on the industry that you're in, there's tremendous waste that's going on. Just because folks are not, ironically enough, collaborating and sharing within their own groups about what they're doing. So this is what I call my he said, she said slide. So we ask the same questions to IT. And by the way, we go into this in great detail in the report. Highly encourage you to download the report. I'll give you the link at the end of the presentation. We basically asked the same questions, and we said, okay, of the tools that are being used, and there's a total of 7 different tools that we consider collaboration. Can you give me a ranking of which tools are being used by everyone? Now, the interesting thing is that IT and the lines of businesses agreed on the order. So audio conferencing was number 1 for both. What was interesting is that the disconnect between what IT says is being used and what the lines of businesses are saying is being used. The first one, audio conferencing, is amazing to me because, how many of you call into a bridge, regularly every week, right? Show of hands. It's pretty common, right? Audio conferencing still can cost up to 30 cents a minute. And it's something that's pretty easy to set up, right? You call your local telco company. There's obviously a lot of different companies that aggregate that information and the usage, and you can probably negotiate a better rate. But just from the savings you would get by taking a look at your costs of audio conferencing, you can actually justify deploying a web-based conferencing system that includes video and document sharing as well. If you keep going down the line, web conferencing, 33% IT says everyone uses it, 54%. So where you're seeing these big disconnects is where your IT is saying, this is what I'm investing in. The lines of businesses are saying, I'm buying my own audio conferencing tools. I'm buying my own web conferencing tools. I know you made this particular tool available to me, but I'm using something else. right? And so there's a huge disconnect between what's actually being used. It's messaging. IT thinks only 19% are using IM, whereas 41% are using it. And IM could be anything from Link that's included in your Office 365 license to a WhatsApp type application to the consumer, which I'll talk a little bit about. So, yes? Is there a mic? So this, I could barely hear you myself. I'm sorry.
Why do you believe the line of business figures are right?
Microphone's on its way.
Yeah. So the question is, why do we believe that the lines of businesses are right versus IT? Oh, well, because they tend to be the users of the technology, right? So at least it could be a subset of if I'm asking someone from sales, say, do you believe that everyone uses web conferencing? They say, well, it would be everyone from their department, I guess, right? But they would have a better indication of what's actually being used. I think the IT perspective is, this is what I make available versus what I'm actually using.
Wouldn't the IT be a data-driven comment, whereas the line of business is a finger-in-the-air comment?
Well, the way we look at it is the IT are the facilitators of the technology, and the lines of businesses with different departments within organizations would be the actual users. And yes, I encourage questions in the middle of the presentation. So let's talk a little bit about the role of consumer-based applications. How many of you use WhatsApp? Show of hands. How many of you use it for business? Do your IT guys know you use it for business? Doesn't matter, right? The interesting thing with WhatsApp, almost 1 billion users. And by the way, guilty as charged, I use WhatsApp all the time as well. Most recently, I was in South Africa, no Wi-Fi coverage, terrible bandwidth, by the way, in South Africa, FYI. If any of you are responsible for providing broadband in South Africa, there's a great opportunity there. But I had 4G in my hotel, I needed to make a phone call. I did a WhatsApp call to one of my employees in Singapore, 20-minute call. The quality was amazing. It was fabulous. Now, the alternate to that would have been using my phone, getting the roaming charges from AT&T, probably paying, I don't know, $8, $9, $10 a minute, whatever the roaming charges would have been. A 20-minute call would have probably been $30, $40. Do you think my CIO cares that I made a WhatsApp call? No. If anything, he looked at that and said, okay, well, you're using an over-the-top technology, you're making a phone call to another employee. If the call drops, not a big deal. You're saving me money, and you got the job done, which is great. So what we're starting to see, and what the report basically told us, was IT is accepting the fact that these consumer-based applications are in the enterprise. Now, some applications are okay. If I want to make a FaceTime call, a FaceTime audio call is actually, the quality is fabulous. It's a point-to-point connection, not a big deal. If I want to share company confidential information on Google Drive and send you an email through my Gmail account and say, hey, I just posted the earnings announcement we're going to make next week, just click on this link, that's a problem. So somewhere in between the fact that the technology is convenient and easy to use and the fact that nobody wants to get arrested or get fired lies the truth. So what we're seeing is an adoption of the technology, and we're seeing actually creative ways that consumer-based applications are entering into the enterprise. At Dimension Data, we had a group that started using Yammer prior to Microsoft acquiring it. And so these work groups started popping up. And a lot of confidential information was being shared on Yammer. And then we got a phone call from an inside sales guy at Yammer, called our CIO and said, hey, you got 2,300 users. Would you be interested in the enterprise license version of this? Unbeknownst to IT, 2,300 users were using it. So his initial reaction was, no way, I'm going to shut it down. And then he found out that my boss, the CEO of the company, was using Yammer. So we signed an ELA for Yammer, and we got the protection that we needed, private data centers, and then education to the field about, hey, it's okay to share some kind of information, but not other types of information. So we're embracing these kinds of applications within the enterprise because you have to. People are using it. You can't really stop it. There's an acceptance that you can't stop it, but there's also a limit, I guess, if you will. You have to stay within your compliance and within your security constraints and within your data sovereignty constraints. So this is the challenge between the LOBs and between the CIOs, if you will. So then we, same thing in the he said, she said category. We asked the same question. So I'm not sure what that was. So what's the main reason? So why are you using them? Well, number one, IT and LOB, this is where they agreed. It's ease of use, right? How hard is it to use WhatsApp? You download it, iTunes Store or on the website, and it's available, right? And you can make a call. How difficult is it to use Facebook? I mean, actually, Facebook is using an engine right now where you can download other consumer-based apps and you could use your Facebook login. You don't even have to bother registering. You can actually use Facebook's registration. It can't get any easier than that. Now compare that to setting up a new WebEx account within your organization, getting your VC endpoint, your DX80 registered in the corporate directory. Make sure that you have all the LDAP connections into your corporate directory. Make sure that you have holes in your firewall so you can make outbound video calls. So you have this complexity in the enterprise that's preventing us from getting adoption. And then you've got this ease of use tool that honestly my 12-year-old kid can teach me how to use within minutes. So ease of use is number one. Now number two, this one's actually quite fascinating too, because how many of you have video systems that cannot communicate outside of your organization? A couple, right? So more than we think. The number two reason why people use these consumer-based applications is because the tools that IT is providing in too many cases prevents you from talking to a client, a supplier, a friend, someone outside your own organization. The firewalls prevent you from doing a video session with a client, which is ridiculous. So they're saying, well, I need to communicate with this person. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to step aside. The number one reason that collaboration tools are not being used within the lines of businesses is because we have an inability to communicate outside my organization. So still, there's a number of organizations that are still stuck in the, I'm going to keep you ring fenced within your own organization, and I won't allow you to communicate outside. So, and again, this is a subset of the summary and the recommendations that we've given. The report there's a whole section on cloud and cloud adoption, which I don't have enough time to go through. I'd spend another half hour on that alone. But number one is you need a clearly defined strategy. Take a step back and say, do I have a strategy for us to deploy within an organization? What am I trying to accomplish? Can I meet my users' needs and also educate the lines of businesses that, hey, we have compliance rules that we need to go through. CIOs tell me, hey, before I deploy anything, I need to talk to my CISO, my compliance officer. Right? So there's an education that needs to occur with the lines of businesses, and that's how you form a joint strategy. Number two is the ROI, the way you justify this kind of tool has moved from I'm going to use video technology so we don't have to travel anymore to this is a productivity tool that can actually help me lead to sales. So we're starting to see the introduction of intimacy channels, we call them in contact centers, where if you call me and I find out that you get authenticated and you're a really important client of Barclays, for example, and you want to be routed to the wealth management group and I want to create a more intimate connection, I want to be able to have a video session with you with my experts, we can create that kind of connection, right? So we're really starting to think about outbound, and we're starting to think about productivity gains, not just from cost savings, but as a tool to increase sales. We talked about lines of businesses, and then finally on the consumer-grade applications, they are absolutely not the enemy. If anything, we're seeing a big consumer-to-business adoption of tools. We're seeing a big direction towards ease of use. And a lot of tools are actually built for the enterprise. Slack is a great example. It was really built for enterprise clients, but using the consumer-grade ease-of-use capabilities, we're starting to get better as an industry in order to improve that. So the report is connectedenterprisereport.com. You don't have to provide anything other than your name, your email address, and your blood type, and you can download it. If you have any other questions, please feel free to contact us. Come see us at the Dimension Data booth right across the hall. We have a couple of minutes if there's any questions. Nope. Thanks very much for your time.